boardroom here at RAA in my land. We're presenting from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we also respect their spiritual relationship with country. Also, from an RAA perspective, we're really proud that we recently received conditional approval of our first Reconciliation Action Plan. So we look forward to doing more work in this area, and a priority for us has really been looking at our policies and commercial opportunities to help our network in culture and nature-based tourism experiences in the state. So it's something we're really passionate about and might get the opportunity to talk about that this afternoon. Of course, we would have liked to have held the event in person, but with the ever-changing environment, we felt this was the safest and best decision. And so most of our sessions have been in the virtual format, and that's actually allowed more people to participate, which is great. As I mentioned, this is our 8th regional forum in the lead up to the state election. And it's an opportunity for us to acknowledge some of the challenges that the tourism industry is facing, but also some of the opportunities that lay ahead. In terms of some housekeeping, today's webinar is being recorded, so we'll be able to share a link with you after the event, and we welcome you to revisit the content and of course share it with colleagues. A really handy tip is to set your view to gallery mode, which can be found in the top right-hand corner. Reminder, as I said, to stay on mute when you're not speaking and be respectful of other speakers so that we can have an open and constructive discussion. We'll hear from our speakers shortly, but really it's about maximising time for Q&A. But when I say Q&A, it's actually also about sharing your views too. So just as you would in Talkback Radio, you can also make a statement as a question, because we want to hear and air all of the great ideas and hear from you on the ground. We invite you to use the Zoom chat function to put your comments and questions, and I'll keep reminding you as we go through the Q&A section as well. So if you think of a question or a comment at any point in the discussion, please just type it in and we'll come to it during the discussion. We've also had a lot of questions and some great feedback submitted on behalf of your business or region, and we will be putting these questions to Eddie, Sean and Gina as we go. So we'll open the Q&A with the existing questions that we've got. So today we're going to have 3 speakers, and I'd like to introduce Sean de Bruin, the Chief Executive of TIC SA. Give us a wave. Sean, excellent. We know the microphones are working. Gina Norman, to my right, who is the RAA General Manager of Travel and Distribution, and Eddie Hughes, MP, the member for Giles. Give us a shout, Eddie. So I know, yes, fabulous. And also from the RAA team, Charles Mountain, who is a familiar voice and face to many of you. He's our Senior Manager of Safety and Infrastructure, and he can obviously join the conversation at any point in time because of the strong connection between roads and tourism, which no doubt, especially given the current environment and the severe weather event, is likely to come up in conversation. So Charles is happy to join in as needed. There may be other dignitaries or important people from the industry in the electorate that have joined the call that I haven't acknowledged, or I can't see your name jump up yet. So please feel free to turn on your camera and introduce yourself via the chat function so I can introduce you more formally. And certainly I think that Jeremy Khan, who is the Economic Development Manager for the RDA Far North, was hoping to join us. So if he jumps on a little later, we can bring him into the conversation as well. So Sean, I'll now introduce you, CEO of TIC SA, a familiar face, to start our webinar. He has deep and varied tourism and business experience and should be well known to many of you, brings a lot of wealth of experience in relationship management, business planning, destination and experience development, marketing and distribution, as well as the government engagement over the last 20 years. So please welcome Sean.
Thanks very much, Emily. I'll start my stopwatch and get going. 3 minutes. So there's really 2 things I want to do in 3 minutes. Is one, talk to you about how the industry is travelling at the moment and some of the latest numbers we've got, and 2, talk about our advocacy work going into the election and the policy setting that industry want to see. This first chart represents our last quarterly survey of tourism businesses. We had 370 businesses fill the survey in, and it represents business activity in October, November and December. And you can see there that it's really challenging. It's a really challenging period for many businesses across the state. This is, bearing in mind, this is a statewide number. What businesses told us was 64% had experienced a significant downturn in business activity during that 3-month period at the end of last year. 42% were open, but with less staff and less operational trading conditions. And 75% of businesses said that consumer confidence was a key issue in their business. So very challenging in terms of business activity. The next slide looks at the segmentation. Just go back. I'll come forward one. I'll just speak to the segmentation that obviously there's different reasons that people travel, business events, business in general, festivals, events, and then holiday and leisure. And what we saw across that 3-month period as well is that there was a significant decline. Over 50% in businesses that filled in the survey reported that holiday and leisure was in decline. There was some, probably about 20% said there was an increase, and about 25% said that it was static. Festivals and events, again, a significant decline, very little growth there reported. And then business and business events were both a majority in decline, but there was a little bit more positivity in that segment. Just moving into our recovery agenda, there's 5 key areas that we're advocating for based on our industry consultation. That's reinvestment and restart. That's about helping businesses with a hand up. Those businesses have potentially lost good staff. Their infrastructure has been sold down, and potentially they've taken on more debt than they've ever had. They need some support from government to get going again and to reinvest in their future. Driving demand, that's about marketing and leisure events. Industry, critical to the success is that an incoming state government provides resources to the South Australian Tourism Commission to take on that marketing job. Infrastructure experience development, business capability is an incredibly important area, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this webinar. And lastly, partnerships. It's so important that we leverage our partnerships across government and across industry. So that's my 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So back to you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's a really great platform, and we've really sought to kind of amplify and work with TIC SA. So this has been a great opportunity to do that. I'll introduce our next speaker, Gina Norman, RAA General Manager, Travel and Distribution, who I said also more than 2 decades of experience in tourism, customer service, retail industries, etc. Gina is an incredibly strong advocate for the industry and really committed to the viability and also the growth of the sector. So please welcome Gina.
Thanks for the intro, Emily. Thanks, Sean, for your presentation. Hi, everyone. Some of the people here today will know and be working with RAA through the travel side of our organisation, and others might be really surprised to know that RAA Travel is one of the longest running travel agencies in the state, and we started in October 1958. So for more than 60 years, we've been working with and supporting tourism operators just like yourselves. The last 2 years have been incredibly tough for the industry, and today is about giving you the opportunity to ask your local politicians about what supports there are for tourism in your region and what the pathway to recovery looks like for your business. At RAA, we want to see the tourism sector return to the vibrant and growing sector it is known for being. That's why we've partnered with TIC SA to amplify our voice and support tourism businesses and operators like yourselves to grow the visitor economy in South Australia. To be travel ready, we need to make it easy and safe for people to travel around South Australia. Despite COVID-19, strong interstate travel has meant some regions have experienced strong activity. However, this has revealed certain infrastructure problems in regional South Australia. That's why when the government introduced the Local Government Infrastructure Partnership Program, we welcomed it. Now we want it to continue. We want to see the next state government commit to an ongoing regional tourism grant program to support upgrades to town centres and local infrastructure. We also recognise that roads need to be safe and well maintained so people can get to the fantastic tourist destinations that you offer. That's why we're calling for a 4-year road maintenance fund with a minimum value of $600 million to be put towards transparent road maintenance. Roads do support tourism, and for the Giles electorate, we are advocating for the full duplication of the Sturt Highway by 2050. RAA welcomed the government's recent announcement of the duplication of the Augusta Highway between Copper Coast Overpass and Lochiel. However, RAA is continuing to call for the full duplication of the Augusta Highway. Another key outcome to mention is the government's recent announcement of a draft 2022 to 2032 cycling strategy for SA. We've called for a state cycling strategy, and we're pleased with the government's recent commitment to develop this, and we would like to see this strategy implemented across regions, making accessibility and connectivity better for all. As Emily mentioned, Charles Mountain is on the call to talk to any of these projects in more detail if needed. Improving access via infrastructure is just one piece of the tourism puzzle. Updating, repairing and extending visitor signage is a priority across all regions, as is improvements to visitor infrastructure and improved rest areas and facilities. Lastly, we know the key to the recovery of the tourism sector is a skilled workforce. Yesterday marked an important date with the reopening of the international borders. However, the challenge will be scaling up a skilled workforce in the time needed to meet demand. In an RAA survey, operators identified recruiting and retaining staff as the #1 barrier to growing their business. And while we are pleased with the government's announcement just this weekend of a further round of business hardship grants, which is a much needed lifeline, the deep issues remain. Lack of international workers, along with job security, housing supply, adequate training and upskilling are prevalent issues driving the growing capacity constraints. It's clear that issues driving skill shortages are multifaceted and require a whole of government response. We are calling for a state strategy with regional tourism employment plans specific to your region to respond to growing skills shortages and to rebuild operator capacity. This is vital so that the sector can be more sustainable and resilient into the future. I know it has been and continues to be extremely tough for you as tourism operators. What has shone through, though, is the incredible resilience of the industry and those working in it. And I really look forward to working with you and supporting you to help grow the visitor economy. Thanks. Back to you.
Thanks, Gina. I think we're all looking forward to transitioning from sort of COVID ready to travel ready, and we're getting the green shoots, as they say, of that. And it's really exciting to see those borders open. And we really want to make sure that we've got planes full going both ways. I'd now like to welcome Eddie Hughes MP, member for Giles. Eddie was first elected as your local member in 2014 and has held roles including Shadow Minister for Primary Industries and Regional Development. I've certainly crossed paths with him in my previous role in resources, and I know what an incredibly passionate advocate he is for the community and his incredibly large electorate. He's a long-time resident of Whyalla, as you would know, and before entering politics, had a career in shipbuilding, steel making and counselling. As I said, this is one of the largest electorates in SA, so the challenge is enormous. And he continues to fiercely advocate, particularly for regional infrastructure planning, which we were sort of talking through before we opened up the call, and continues to fight for increased regional growth funding in the electorate. So please welcome Eddie. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start by just acknowledging what a tough period this has been for tourist operators, people in the hospitality sector. I meet a lot of people across the state, and to listen to their personal stories and what they've gone through as businesses is incredibly tough. I know that on the Eyre Peninsula, and I did have 2 Eyre Peninsula communities. Whyalla is an Eyre Peninsula community, but the 2 others that are dropping out of the electorate, I know that the Eyre Peninsula suffered a 48% decline in business. And when you look at the Flinders Ranges council area, or the Flinders Ranges and the Outback, I think that was about a 37% decline in business. So there's been a big hit, but there's a real need to, and I'll qualify this statement, as we come out of COVID, to invest in the sector and rebuild. The reason I want to qualify the statement, I guess in some respects, there's an element of complacency sneaking in, that this is a virus that has generated a number of surprises, and I don't think people are fully aware of how this virus replicates and mutates. We're assuming we're getting through this particular variant. It does not mean other variants are not going to come. It's and if you're listening to the epidemiologists and others from overseas, they're saying you've got to be really careful here. We don't know what is around the corner. We could actually end up with something as contagious but more virulent. Now let's hope it is going to burn itself out and we can get back to something approaching normal. Some of the things that have been flagged already is infrastructure and some of the infrastructure wishes. It's I've noticed the long timeline on the Stuart Highway, a highway I drive a lot. I find it very comfortable to drive that highway because it's got very long sight lines, lots of straights. It is a very relaxing drive, and I do that drive up to Coober Pedy on a number of times a year. It's my concern when it comes to upgrading some of our road infrastructure is the lack of a commitment to timelines and treating it as a real priority, the upgrade between Port Wakefield and Port Augusta. So even though we've had an announcement about duplication, at that current rate, that is going to take decades. I think that highway should be treated as a priority because it is that highway that opens up the north of our state and the Eyre Peninsula. So it's one of the big priorities. When you look at the things that attract people to my electorate, and I'll focus on my electorate, and I'll point out that the electorate itself is 1.25 the size of Germany, with a population of a relatively small German town. And the communities are mixed. Tourism plays a role in Whyalla, but it's clearly mining, resource processing, and manufacturing that is the bedrock of our community. But there are other communities in the electorate where tourism is far more important. In the Flinders Ranges council area, the communities of Quorn and Hawker, tourism is a major input into those economies. When you look at Coober Pedy and all the challenges that Coober Pedy faces, unfairly in my view, and I'll be flagging some stuff that needs to be done about that. But the Coober Pedy is, when it comes to tourism, it's incredibly important. And there's Andamuka. I think there's a whole potential opal vision there for those communities. It's they are unique communities. Opal is the precious stone of this state. Coober Pedy is the opal capital of the world. I think Andamuka's got an important role to play as well. So there are things that we should be doing to support both of those communities, Andamuka and Coober Pedy, when it comes to promoting those communities, and when it comes to some sensible investment into improving what they've got to offer. And I believe they've actually got a lot to offer. It's and some of that does get back to something as basic as supporting the opal mining industry, because that provides, no pun intended, the bedrock for the tourism experience in those communities. Flinders Ranges council area. I think when we were in government, we demonstrated the importance of investment in some of the assets. It had been within the strategic plan of the Flinders Ranges Council to have upgraded accommodation in the community of Quorn. And the Browns, Wendy Brown and Sally Brown and that family took on a big entrepreneurial risk. We put in, I think, $400,000 as a government at the time to assist that, to build something that did not exist in that community, and that's demonstrated its value. People now visiting in greater numbers. Unfortunately, COVID intervened, but people did visit in greater numbers. You had film crews taking out accommodation in Quorn for extended periods of time. You had work-based there, people doing projects around the region, staying there, and you had tourists there staying there, and that was an offering that was not there before. So I think we do need to look at the individual communities and look at what they need in Whyalla. The big attraction in the winter months that are often quiet for a lot of places has been the cuttlefish aggregation. how do we invest in that to improve what is there on offer at the moment? And it's been something that I've been personally involved with for many years. It's once again, previous government introduced the precautionary principle in order to protect that aggregation. And I'm not going to make much criticism of the current government, but they did then undermine that protection and open up part of the aggregation. And it's so you had tourists there watching commercial fishers take thousands of tons of cuttlefish out of the aggregation. And here you were trying to promote it. Now, as a result of a campaign coming out of this community and the Conservation Council and others, we reinstated that protection in the aggregation itself. But in all of our communities, there are things that we can build on, and government should be present. You want the private sector to do what it can do, but you need to work in partnership with the private sector and assess what is worthwhile doing, what is not worthwhile doing. And like I said, we can point to examples, the Great Northern Lodge, the $1 million that the previous government put into the jetty in Whyalla, which has been a big draw card. Yeah, so there's a whole range of other tourism-related activities that could be developed in this region, and a lot of this region is still essentially unexplored. It's we've got the Upper Spencer Gulf proper between Port Augusta and Whyalla, which is when you look at the Flinders Ranges on one side, the Kultara Escarpment on the other, it is an amazing location that most South Australians know absolutely nothing about. The whole Outback station with their station stays and the capacity of those pastoral properties to do more, and clearly some are, do more than just the pastoral industry, but diversify into tourism. When you look at Coober Pedy and Opal, one of the growing opportunities for Coober Pedy is going to be around Aboriginal art. It's not easy to get to the APY lands and visit the galleries there because of permits. Coober Pedy could be a perfect outlet. They've got the APY Art Collective in Adelaide. They've got the APY Art Collective in Darling Harbour in Sydney. But Coober Pedy, when it gets back to normal, has lots of visitors. And it could be a real place to showcase Aboriginal art from the APY lands and from Coober Pedy in a far more accessible way. And it could be something that is added, the color of the presentation combined with the color of the opal as there's something there. There's something that we could really market for Coober Pedy, but we've got to address some of those basic challenges in Coober Pedy. If you're a tourist operator in Coober Pedy, running all of those showers, running up, they pay 3 times more for their water than you do anywhere else in regional South Australia. That is an issue that needs to be addressed. We need to assist the council to shrink down to basic municipal services. It's been my strong view, and I'll keep arguing it. SA Water should take over their assets, introduce water parity pricing. It will help the whole community, and it will help the tourist operators in Coober Pedy. It's so that I think there are a raft of opportunities throughout the electorate of Giles that any decent government should be assisting with.
Eddie, you make so many good points too. I've also stayed, I can see Charles is, I think he's referring to the Great Northern Lodge as well. I've also stayed with there. I will not, it's not the fault of the operator that my 4-year-old got gastro. That was the only blight on the holiday. The rest of the trip was fantastic, and a shout out to the pharmacy in Port Augusta that really came to the fore. So that was quite a colourful holiday for us. But I think the points that you've made, particularly around the links for your electorate between resources and tourism, and how important it is to manage our natural environment in order to make the most of the opportunities, and how these connection between community issues need to be solved as well in order for us to unlock the real potential for the tourism industry. And particularly the focus on Whyalla and the different opportunities that are being explored there. So normally at this point I would sort of throw a question to our participants, but given that Craig has actually posed a question, and there's another one popping in from Kath Mitchell as well, but I'm going to put Craig on the spot and ask him if he'd like to come off mute and actually share his observation and experience off the back of what you've spoken to, Eddie. Craig, over to you.
I mean, the idea out there is Eddie, I suppose I sat down a while ago with Eddie and I was quite impressed with his idea of wanting to scuttle a boat out through there, which would be a fantastic tourist attraction out at Point Lowly. And so from that, I then was thinking when the council put out a tender for the management of their cottages, and I looked at the cottages and I thought, originally I wasn't really worried. Then I thought you could change the 100-year-old cottage into a cafe, 120-year actually. Change one of those into a cafe. There's nothing like it in Australia. The closest I came across was out at Byron Bay, but that was a new cafe and it really didn't give the experience and it was further away from the water. Whereas the idea that I had in the concept was to actually be able to have boats you could drive straight up, perfect location using older materials, a meeting spot for all the divers. You could have, it has 460 cars a day go along that road. And so it made sense to me that if you've got that many cars every day, there's nowhere for anyone to even get some ice, water, anything out through there. Well, I suppose there is public water, but actually to buy anything, sit out for a coffee. And so the proposal had to do it. Unfortunately, I was pretty disappointed that council made the decision to not even consider even allowing any drawings. They had already awarded the contract through, I mean, I'm not making comments, but it's just that I am aware that it was close contact that was involved with the council. And I've never had such disgusting feedback where every single meeting was wrong. Every single meeting I got a time to the stage where I did a presentation to council. I got a phone call 10 minutes before I was supposed to do a presentation. I had not even aware that I was supposed to present. I dropped everything. I went there and did a presentation. And I just sort of think, if this is the way a council is going to run something, I'm not even interested in getting involved. I'm just disappointed because as far as I'm concerned, it's a region that could have had so much, and I still believe should be looked at because the opportunity it creates. Anyway,
I think I'd agree with you. I think there is a real opportunity on the Point Lowly Peninsula. You would be aware that the number of grey nomads and others that stop over there and camp there, either camp at Point Lowly Peninsula or at Fitzgerald Bay and up the northern coastline. If you did have a cafe, and I'd be saying that if you did have a cafe, but it had a bit of a different offering than what you can find in Whyalla itself, that you build on some of the things that the area is known for. When you look at aquaculture going back into Fitzgerald Bay, the capacity to do a whole range of things with kingfish fresh out of the water there, it's I would say that cuttlefish is actually delicious, but we want to protect that. So, but all sorts of other seafood just from that area could be a highlight of a cafe like that. And if you had something that developed a reputation, it would actually attract people. It's so it wouldn't just be the people that just happen to be in the area, but if you had somewhere that was good to eat with those seafoods that had a culinary reputation, it's the sort of thing that does attract people to a location. And once COVID quietens down, I remember going out and when the previous government, when this government, undermined the aggregation, I went out and met with a whole bunch of divers, and there was on this day there was a couple of hundred divers at the dive entry spot, and I went around and spoke to some, and there was a bunch of people there, and different groups that had come to Point Lowly before the COVID restrictions came in, the international travel restrictions came in. When I spoke to them, there was some divers from South Africa, and I asked, where did you hear about the cuttlefish? They heard about it in South Africa. There were some people from South America, from Brazil. Where did you hear about it? They heard about it in South America. And there were some Americans that had heard about the cuttlefish, dive experience in America. So this is something that is out in those networks, and I believe the potential is still barely tapped. But if we want to make the most of it in a way that we do not put the cuttlefish at risk, we need more in that area to have people do the dive, and then maybe some accommodation, maybe some, as you say, a cafe. You can go and get a beer, you can go and get a coffee, some decent wine, some good food. It would enhance that area. So I agree with you. A cafe would be good out there, and it's one of those cases though where and it's very disappointing to hear your experience with the council. It's one of those cases where you want private enterprise to take that initiative and see that there is that opportunity there, and then build it out.
Sean, on that, just to build on this as an example, what comments would you have or observations about the role between private operators and the government, and how they can lean in and identify these new opportunities and create marketing opportunities? And Gina, I guess to follow on after Sean, thinking through the distribution aspect of how you connect people to these new experiences.
Yeah, no, thanks, Emily. Product development is so critical, isn't it? And we've heard that in a number of our regional events around the state, is that it's one thing to get the visitor here, but then we've got to make sure that they have a great experience when they come here, and that they go away and they talk about it. Word of mouth will always be the best for marketing. So in terms of product development, it's very challenging for businesses to do that. And when, as Craig talked about, interacting with local government, whether it's local government, state or federal government, there's always challenges interacting with governments around product development initiatives and trying to get things up that are going to be appealing to visitors. We've seen the current government have a very strong focus around nature-based tourism over the last few years, and there's been some really good product development occur with some of those nature-based tourism assets. The cuttlefish has promised so much for so long, and Eddie talks about how people from around the world are finding this place almost by accident. I think part of it is you've got international film crews coming here that are going, this is a globally significant wildlife natural phenomenon, which then gets documented in some of these most prestigious wildlife documentaries, which goes around the world. And then it is one of those iconic sites that if you're a diver that likes interacting with wildlife, you've got to come and do the cuttlefish experience. So the opportunity is immense. To develop the product and do it in a sustainable way is a massive challenge.
Right. I mean, I don't want to focus on wild because I think it's important we talk about the north of the state, but just when it comes to attracting, say that market divers, you've got the cuttlefish here in the winter. I did visit Sydney to have a look at the Sydney and the Hobart with the view to securing a dive wreck for the Upper Spencer Gulf, and we looked at the location, and it would have been far better than the Hobart south of Adelaide, given the location. You could dive on it 90% of the year, whereas it's only a relatively small fraction of the year you can dive on the Hobart. So it's something to add. And one of some of the operators that have spoken to me in the north of the state, and some of them have been hit really hard. It's people like Trevor Wright and Lake Eyre and the vast outback, the way his business was hit and got very little in the way of support from the federal government or the state government. But he will argue this, that there's an opportunity now with, even though the rain has caused a lot of damage, it's also going to do some amazing good in the arid lands. We're probably going to see a whole range of plants that we haven't seen for a long time. There's species that have appeared that you only get with these heavy rains. So the opportunity for the vast outback is great. But
that's a really good point, Eddie, because I was talking to Trevor last week actually, and Cass has raised it on the chat as well, that these natural phenomenons, and Lake Eyre is, I think it's Australia's Great Barrier. It's our answer. It's our state's answer to the Great Barrier Reef, but it only happens once every 5-10 years. But when it does happen, it's a phenomenon like nothing else on the globe, and people come from everywhere to experience. And Trevor was telling me last week that He's got all sorts of domestic interests, people that would be going to the Arctic to see the polar bears, or heading to, you know, Galapagos to see, you know, the wonderful things, you know, these natural phenomena around the world. They're now exploring their own country, and a lot of them are considering coming to Lake Eyre this year, or are on their way there, because there is significant water there. Cass talked about the opportunities and the product development infrastructure issues that we're facing out of Coober Pedy, to get people out there and make sure they have a really good experience.
Yeah, and there is some of those basic issues when it comes to the quality of the road and maintaining the quality of the road, whether it's the Unadata track, whether it's the linking track between Coober Pedy and William Creek, and some of the challenges that presents. So there needs to be more responsiveness, more resources going into maintaining some of those important outback roads, and that at times has been lacking, and that in turn has an impact on the capacity to attract people to the regions. At least those.
Gina, can I ask, what do you see in terms of RAA travel for cuttlefish, for Lake Eyre, for these natural phenomena that are so special to our state?
Yeah, we're seeing a real increase. I mean, the last 2 years of COVID, we've seen a dramatic increase in inquiry for experiences and authentic and natural experiences across the state, and we've seen more demand for further regions. So certainly from our perspective, where people used to look for the sort of 2-day weekenders, they were looking for the 5 and 6 and 7 day, which takes them further. So it takes them to outback and takes them to Eyre. And people want the whole thing to learn about it at once. So they want the accommodation, they want the experiences, they want to know where they can dine, they want to know how they're going to be able to get around. And I really believe it's a collaborative piece that needs to happen within the regions for operators to work with tourism bodies to actually create experiences that are a collaboration. So it includes more than one element, rather than people having to book each element individually, and they don't know what to book and they don't have the knowledge on it, and people are very time poor. They don't have the time to research. The average person looks at 48 websites when they're trying to book a holiday these days. Now that's just nuts. So for them to find information easily is really important, and in the development of product, operators need to have online bookable products and embrace the digital space. And there's certainly, so from a TIC-SA perspective and from an RAA travel perspective, both of us can help people with understanding that distribution piece and really helping to make it easy. We know that people work incredibly hard within their businesses to create the actual experiences and then to serve the actual experiences and the accommodation and everything else. That is not necessarily lots of time or energy or funds to then spend that on trying to distribute product and market and advertise and everything else. So you really need to work with partners. We have our own platform from RAA perspective that we can help people actually distribute their products. And yeah, we'd love to see people collaborate more within the region. But if you'd like help, we'll certainly have the contact details after the call. If people want to get in contact, and Dougal, my colleague who's the business development manager for South Australia, is on the call, so he can help as well with actually understanding how to distribute the product and develop the experiences, but the connection piece is really important.
Can I ask Charles, with the comment that Cass has put up around the road infrastructure, have you got any advice in terms of how tourism businesses can engage with government to see that the product is delivered when the visitors are looking for it, and how, you know, we as tourism people can influence state government, local government to get that infrastructure in place when it's needed?
Look, I'd suggest obviously continue to talk to the department or talk to us, and we can frame some of this up in the context of a regional roads package, for example. We do our what we call regional road assessments, where we go out and identify key locations and priorities, and that also includes the unsealed road network to an extent as well, obviously, and that's where a lot of the challenges will come in this area, because these roads will see a lot of traffic in a fairly short space of time, and that has big impact in terms of the level of maintenance. We know the councils and department struggle generally to maintain these roads at a good quality level at the best of times, let alone under the impact of a heavy tourist load. So that will definitely be a challenge. Obviously, referring back to the major roads such as the Stewart Highway and the connection up to Coober Pedy, really critical that there's an opportunity to learn some lessons from what's happened with the recent floods, and look to how that road can perhaps be better future-proof to ensure that it's not, it might suffer perhaps some local flooding, but not be closed for the period of time that we've seen recently. So there's some good opportunities to learn, and all these things will give people security of travel when they venture up there as well. But having those key base points off the Stewart, and certainly support what you said about Coober Pedy, having been up there many times and sort of experienced the environment up there, that certainly there's opportunities to improve things, and that's a good starting point.
Thanks, Charles. Another point too that we're always happy to help as much as possible, given our regular contact with the department, is signage. It's something that has come up in some of the other forums too, where we know that operators have had issues having signage replaced or having it at an appropriate standard. So that's with our connections too. We're keen to understand where some of those issues might be that we can assist. And obviously, I know that Eddie's a strong advocate for the community too, and has a strong voice, but we're happy to help from a departmental point of view, if useful. Kath, was there anything further, and we've sort of covered off your question because you were good enough to put it in the chat, but was there anything else that you wanted to add in relation to nature-based tourism?
Yeah, hi, it's Kath Mitchell from the Business Association in Coober Pedy, and I represent a couple of businesses up there as well. Look, I think the road is something that's quite important. I've spoken to a couple of touring operators who simply won't take people out to the lake because of the condition of the road. So we're missing out on lots of potential opportunities. I'm also the agent for budget car hire in Coober Pedy myself personally. And at the moment, with the condition of the road out to the edge of the lake, just out of William Creek, I just have to say no to anyone who wants to hire a car, because I just can't afford to have vehicles bogged out there or damaged. So while there's already been quite a number of inquiries to get out there, and people are looking for ways to get to the lake from Coober Pedy, we're sort of a little bit stuck because we don't have the operators in place to pick up that slack. And with the road conditions being unknown, there's nobody really prepared to step into that space at the moment. We did have Arid Areas Tours running that road for many years, and he basically destroyed 2 vehicles in his touring as he toured around that country. So it's a really big issue. And given Lake Air services from Port Augusta up to Maree, people going through the Flinders Ranges, as you say, Sean, it's a really, really central, important part of the state that I think is often overlooked in terms of infrastructure maintenance, even toilet facilities, rubbish facilities. It's a bit of a shame that we can't spend a little bit more effort out there. And this year will be huge. It will probably be one of the biggest years we've ever seen out there. So that's just my comments on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Bins and toilets are important, and they're not the sexy things to talk about, but at a time when you've got potentially, and we saw it through COVID, and there were lots of coverage at different times of the past sort of 18 months, where that influx of intrastate tourism in different points just overwhelm basic services, because we're not set up for that sort of peaky influx. So it's something that we're very alive to, and thinking about how we can support operators in that way as well. So just a reminder, we've still got a few more minutes. If people have questions or comments, as I said, that they'd like to pop in the chat, or bring yourself off mute, put your hand up, your virtual hand, so I know. I'm scanning through the names of participants too, so apologies if I've missed you. So please jump into the conversation. But what I might ask you, Eddie, is what do you see, and again, participants to jump in, but when you kind of boil it down, what do you see as the real tourism priorities for the electorate?
It's well, they would focus on, I guess, the three broad areas for my electorate. It's and I have to say I've got the western part of Port Augusta there, but Port Augusta tends to benefit because nearly all the tourists go through Port Augusta, and we did just announce we're going to commit $3 million towards the Arid Lands Botanic Garden in Port Augusta. The state funds Botanic Gardens in Adelaide, but it's been left to the council and the community to show the investment when it comes to the arid lands in Port Augusta. So that $3 million is going to be great. And then I'll break the into there's Whyalla, there's Coober Pedy and the vast outback and the smaller communities. One of which isn't smaller, which is Roxby Downs and Andamooka nearby, and then the Flinders Ranges Council area, and they've all got different offerings. So I think there are some real priorities in Coober Pedy, and some of that is about basic governance structure and a recognition from the state that this is a community that has shouldered a burden in a remote location with a small ratepayer base that we do not expect any other council to shoulder in this state. The provision of basic essential services. It should be the responsibility of either the state government or a utility. It should not be the responsibility of that community. Now that does not seem like an immediate tourism thing, but it helps reduce costs in that community, which will benefit tourism operators. And we've got to sort out governance in Coober Pedy, where do we go in future? Yeah, I probably don't have to say much about the Flinders Ranges. In some respects it sells itself, but there's some of the offerings there are just the natural beauty, those nature-based experiences. I think Aruna Dam, which is now open to fishing, is something that is so far under promoted. The fossil history in the Flinders Ranges. Once again, here is something of international significance that we've had Attenborough and others at. There's some real opportunities there, and there is going to be some investment. So that is good to see. And Whyalla, it is cuttlefish. It is the marine experience. We do have some outback experiences, but that would be the nub of what I would be promoting here in Whyalla, and it requires a government state government, federal government to partner with their council and with their private enterprise to identify those elements that justify public investment.
We heard the same when we recently had our Gold 50 events, and we came up through the Upper Spencer Gulf. We sat down with councils on our way through from Clare through to Whyalla, and certainly that was the same feedback we had in Port Augusta too, was that there's a very heavy burden there for maintaining infrastructure and services like the Arid Lands Botanic Gardens, which is beautiful. I've been there myself as well, and it's great facilities, and yet the community is really shouldering the burden of some of those costs, which elsewhere they simply wouldn't be.
Because it runs at a deficit of $650,000 a year, so you've got a community that is not a rich community expected to pick that deficit up, never mind the reinvestment that is needed in that facility. So I think that $3 million is going to be gratefully accepted, and then it'll be, if I'm re-elected, up to me to ensure that ongoing support is embedded for years to come, irrespective of the government that's in power.
What are the other issues that, and then when we wrap up, I'll come to Charles to talk about some of the regional road assessments to close. But one question before we do that was around skill shortages and accommodation shortages. So interested in your reflections on what those issues are currently looking like from your electorate point of view, particularly with resource projects and infrastructure projects now, that influx of sort of a temporary workforce and residents, and how that plays out in your community, various communities, and the impact on tourism.
Because just to add to that, Emily, as well, the housing we've heard around the state is an incredible shortage. Is that something playing out, different elements?
It plays out in different ways. It's the and this is actually a really deep issue. It's not speaking on behalf of my party here, but unless there's a fundamental change to how we approach housing, whether it's public housing, whether it's private sector investment, we're gonna be faced with a whole range of challenges. I think both as a nation and as a state, we've dropped the ball when it comes to housing policy. So the impact on young people looking to enter the market, the impact on when you've got potential business development, the lack of housing, the lack of affordable rents, because rents, we have these resource projects, we have a solar farm built or a wind farm or this or that, and rents just go right up. We've experienced here in Whyalla with the $100 million school that's been built and the impact that had on private rentals. So there are actually some profound issues and real market failure when you look at regional communities and housing. I actually think we need to return to a 21st century version of the housing trust. I think government is going to have to get more heavily involved, and over an extended period of time that can be cost neutral. It can be build to rent, and not just aimed at people in category 1. Build to rent. I had a family that came out from England, and just about everyone that came out to work had public housing. Yeah, we need to get back to, and it gives a lot of people a start in life as well. We need to get back to a 21st century approach to what the housing trust had originally. That is not just for people in category 1, but it's for a wider strata of people, because the private sector are very reluctant to invest. So there needs to be some government involvement, and that can be direct build, or it can be far more creative partnerships with the private sector, so that we are able to provide housing for a wide range of people. And I guess there's people in the tourism industry, and it's another issue, and it gets back to skills and training. I'm obviously a fan of secure work. And some people are fine with casual work and work where the security might not be there. But given the demands that we now have, and this is across the board, and it's because we no longer have this huge influx of people from overseas. We've got skill shortages literally across the board in just about every sector. Now, once people start coming back from overseas, that's part of it, but I think we should learn something from that as well. And I guess that gets back to our school system. It's producing, enabling kids to move into all sorts of different areas. So there needs to be, and there can be, that focus in the school system with school-based traineeships and apprenticeships. When it comes to tourism and hospitality, but industry is just literally across the board now are just grappling with these skill challenges, and I would say that as a nation and as a state, in some ways, many years ago, we dropped the ball. We got really lazy on depending upon people coming from overseas, and this is not disparaging people from overseas. That's going to be an element of it, but we dropped the ball when it came to training our own people. We dropped the ball when it came to, there's this focus on tertiary education and university sector. No problem with that, because a lot of jobs are going to come out of that sector in the future and now. But there's all sorts of other jobs that people in regional communities can enter into, in tourism and hospitality and other sectors. We need to be doing far more.
That's something that Gina's, I know, very passionate about too, is how do we make the travel and tourism industry attractive again to people when they've seen so much change and uncertainty.
Yes, I mean, I think we need a big PR overhaul of tourism roles and a career in tourism, rather than it being a job where you go through school or uni and then you choose something else, of really showing people that you can actually earn qualifications doing it, but they can be lifelong qualifications. And there's the service roles, obviously, but there's also great leadership roles that go with hospitality and tourism as well. We've really got to invest in that as a state to make sure that we're promoting it. And I think TIC SA have brilliant short courses for people to develop skills across all of the different facets of tourism, and they can be done in bite-sized pieces as micro-credentials that enable people to learn and access the skills element, but be able to use it straight away, sort of the next day. And it can make a really big difference to business very quickly, but it can also make people feel as though there's an opportunity to learn, and people need to see it as how they can add value to their own business, but how they can add value to their people through that education piece.
Sean, is there anything you wanted to add to that before I ask Charles to give a plug to our regional road assessments?
Yeah, no, I just support what Gina's saying. What we hear from industries is really three key elements. It's careers in tourism, how we communicate with, year 10, 11, 12, high school students and their parents. It's the traineeships, apprenticeships, the skills in the middle, and then it's capability, because most tourism businesses are SMEs. They're looking for capability. They want to know how to enhance their digital platform, or how to be online bookable, or how to do good customer service. And it's that capability piece for SME operators. It's really those three elements that we hear from industry that state government and industry need to work together on.
Great. Charles, given there's been so much interest in roads, would you like to give a bit of an update about our regional road assessments?
Yes, look, I'll just give a quick plug, as you say, because we plan to come up towards the end of this year to do the Mid-North and the Flinders region of the state. And we'll be in touch with all the key stakeholders to try and get a better understanding of the specific issues, and particularly how it relates to road access and the general ability around the region as well. So we got as far as Corn last year, checking out the Horrocks Highway, and obviously we were pleased with the work that's been done to date. But obviously the critical part still remains to be done between Gawler and Tarlee, so we're pushing on to see that piece of work complete. But what's been done to date on the Horrocks is certainly heartening, but obviously we need to get a better understanding of what's further north as well. So that will be our project for this year, amongst heading out to the Murraylands region as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. With that, thank you for a great conversation today, and for Eddie, of course, your participation, and I know that everyone really appreciates the constructive way that you engage in these debates as well. So you had the opportunity to have the floor, I believe, as Sean said, Eddie everywhere up there with your youthful core flute. So thank you very much for taking time out from your campaigning to have this important conversation and to engage with everyone. That really concludes the formalities, and I think we're all acutely aware of why tourism matters, which is really what we've called this series, and why it's important for our region and our state and your incredible electorate. All of our speakers are happy for you to contact them if you have any follow-up questions, and we'll be sharing contact details along with a short survey to get your views. We're obviously doing what we call at RAA test and learn, and we're really excited to have this partnership and opportunity to work with TIC SA and for us to lean into these important policy issues. So very keen to hear your feedback so that we can help inform what these types of events might look like going forward. So thank you very much for your participation. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope to be back in your electorate in person, having a networking event and talking about these issues and celebrating some of the work that hopefully together we can achieve.
Okay, excellent. So, see you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, everyone, for participating.